Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Destiny.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Destiny Lore Emissary Logs, hosted by yours truly, Jorio11, and my co-host.
And Salem.
There you go. We are two. Uh, we are both members of our respective lore groups with both the city and Keitel's Ascendancy, and we are here to discuss the lore, universe, history, culture, uh, science behind this universe that we inhabit. Um, and today's podcast is going to be about the houses of the Eliksni, better known to some as the Fallen. So
I thought the
let's.
Eliksni thought the word fallen was
It's
very disrespectful.
it's a bit more of akin to like an insult, similar to how they view us as walking corpses.
Or how the Vanguard views us as space
Space rhinos.
write-ups?
Yeah,
War turtles?
it's confusing at times how Guardians like to identify things. I mean, I've heard Guardians calling Radiolaria Vex milk, so
I've heard them call Vex clankers. I don't even know what that term means.
uh yeah. Apparently it's a type of slur against the robots. Anyways, let's get to this, shall we? So
We shall.
So, what is an Eliksni house? So, in Eliksni culture, houses are basically groups that persisted since their time on Reese. Each house had their own role in society of Reese, and a lot of their names were lost to time. Uh, a great example being the House of Wolves. At one point, was referred to as the Weavers, but as time passed, they were given the title of the Wolves by the Guardians. Um, a lot of their more common names, or the names that we know of, are Guardian translations of their titles. They are not the original titles that those native to Reese have given them, which is certainly interesting how we took stuff from our culture and imprinted it on Fallen culture or Eliksni culture, who in turn started to adapt to human culture once they arrived in the Sol system. But that's for another time. Uh, so there were tons of houses before the whirlwind began. The houses that I can recollect through the records include the House of Devils, the House of Winter, the House of Wolves, the House of Kings, the House of Judgment, the House of Stone, the House of Rain, and the House of Exiles. Each one of these houses had a different role in the society of Reese, with different purposes and functions. And they would eventually have to flee Reese due to an event known as the Whirlwind, which can best be described as something akin to our collapse.
That was when the darkness started invading their home planet.
Exactly, and unlike the Traveler, for us, who stayed, the Traveler abandoned them, which I can't even imagine the amount of
And just
pain.
left them in their own collapse?
Pretty much. The Traveler's
What happened to
motives.
all the Guardian Eliksni? What about their
So,
ghosts? Did they just
so,
disappear?
so here's the interesting thing, and you might not understand this, but just because the Traveler graces a species with the light does not mean that they grant them guardians, or even ghosts for that matter. Ghosts and guardians are exclusive to Earth and the Sol system. Even back when Reese was a planet, the Traveler didn't grace them the same way that it graced us. For example, it is noted on Reese, and these may be incorrect, but it was noted on Reese that after the presence of the Traveler, ether production or ether reserves were higher on their planet, allowing them to grow bigger. Their technological advancement was impressive. Their lifespans also increased, just as ours did when the Traveler arrived in our solar system. But there was no such thing as a guardian for the Eliksni, which is a common misconception, but I can understand why the Cabal didn't really understand that, because the Cabal's first interaction with the Traveler was with us.
It was from the Guardians. That
So,
was during the whole Taken War.
and before. A little bit.
That too. That was just when I first heard about them.
Exactly. But regardless, during the Whirlwind, the forces of darkness arrived, including the Taken King. The leader of one of the houses was charged with keeping. One of the houses was charged with keeping Reese safe. It was the Defense Force. This was known as the House of Stone, and they would unfortunately become the first casualty of the houses of old. The House of Stone was charged with protecting Reese from the whirlwind and allowing all the other houses and as many Eliksni to flee Reese as possible. Now, we do not know many members of the House of Stone, regardless of their status. The only member we know of is Chelchis, the Kell of the House of Stone. And we will quickly go over what a Kell... Actually, let's go over what a Kell is, and let's discuss the hierarchy before we go back into the fate of Chelchis.
I want to say, stone is strong, but it's not unbreakable.
Yeah, well, fair enough. So, when it comes to the Eliksni houses are hierarchical, where you have the lowest of the low, being the dregs, who, after given more ether, can grow up into vandals, who, given more ether...
their arms docked off, like their lower arms?
So, docking process is a punishment process within a house, and I guess I can quickly discuss that. When a Eliksni is punished for perceived fault or crime, they are punished by having their lower two arms ripped off and having these metal plates placed over their stumps called docks. This process is known as docking, and docking prevents the Eliksni dreg to grow up into a vandal because the docks prevent their lower arms from growing. It's a brutal process, and it's exceptionally barbaric. That process was really pioneered during the Drift, which is the time period between the Whirlwind and the Fallen's arrival in the Sol system. The tradition was still carried on into their time into the Sol system, but has since relatively stopped. Anyways, going back, when it comes to the house makeup, you have the hierarchy structure. So at the bottom you have the dregs. In the middle you have the vandals. At the upper ring you have slightly the middle ring area, I guess I would more accurately state. You would have the captains and the servitors. The servitors, if you haven't realized, are machines that are mobile ether production devices that allow Fallen to continue to eat, and because they eat ether, they thrive off of it. It's their nutrients and source of growth. These servitors are in charge of making sure that everybody in a little group is fed and taken care of. Now, these are usually directed by captains, but not always. Now, Above this group of captains and servitors is the upper echelon, the triumvirate of each house. That being the Kel, the Archon Priest, and the Prime Servitor. Now, a Prime Servitor is a massive servitor that also that can and often does distribute ether reserves to smaller servitors and or members of a house, including the Archon Priest and the Kel. The Archon Priest is the individual who determines, makes sure that the ether gets rationed out correctly. Not necessarily the final say. Think of them more like a leader in the sense of like guidance, or maybe even you could say like a police force, as it were. They are the judge and the jury. And then at the top of the triumvirate would be the Kel, the leader, the king, as it translates to in basic, I guess, would be your English. Kel means king. They're the ones who ultimately have the final say, and are technically in charge of the house. Now, a Kel can be overthrown if his rule is considered terrible by the rest of the house's control, as can the Prime Servitor and the Archon Priest. For as much as their rule is as much as they have power within the house, they can also be superseded by other members of said house, especially if their rule is considered weak or cowardly or lopsided. So a Kel and the Archon Priest really have to maintain a fine line of taking control of their house while also making sure that the house does not revolt on them. And trust me, there were quite a many revolts. Anyways, going back, now that we've mentioned what a Kel is, let's go back and discuss the fate of Chelchis, the Kel of Stone. Chelchis, unfortunately, was tasked with staying, due to him being the Kel of the House of Stone, who was the defense of Reese. He was tasked with holding off the darkness for as long as he could to prevent, or to allow other Eliksni to escape from Reese. Unfortunately, he met his fate when he encountered none other than Oryx, the Taken King. It is described by the Doom of Chelchis scout rifle found within the plunderings of the Dreadnought that Chelchis fought against Oryx in the Hive until she was defeated by him. Interesting. This is a new revelation. It appears that Chelchis was a she. Interesting. I did not know that.
Me neither.
It was deemed that Chelchis, after this heroic act, was deemed as the prophesized Kel of Kels, which in Eliksni culture would be the King of Kings, which has some interesting Earth.
I thought Mithrax had that title.
So he would go on to earn said title, but until Mithrax, or Misrax, I should say, to speak in their native tongue, he did not obtain that title until very later on. Not Doom of Chelchis, but Chelchis, the Kel of Stone, was deemed as the Kel of Kels for quite some time. Until another Kel of Kels would eventually rise in his place.
For fighting Oryx, I give her high respects for that.
It is also heavily implied that Chelchis was in fact taken by Oryx, because at this time he was the Taken King.
A shame.
So, the next major point to mention is that all the houses that escaped the whirlwind include the Devils, the Kings, Winter, Wolves, Exile, Scar, Rain, and Judgment. Now, Now, if you want to talk about hierarchy of the houses compared to the others at this time, because obviously their power and importance would shift, kings and judgment were typically at the top and were the most noble of the houses. And at the bottom was the house of, I do believe it is Rain? Yes, the house of Rain is at the bottom. So it's and once again, take this hierarchy into, how I would say, grain of salt. As much as this hierarchy is accurate to their positioning at the time of the drift, as time would progress, these houses power structure would wane and falter and shift. Granted, just about all of these houses would cease to exist with time, especially once they entered the Sol system. It was roughly around this time that the houses became more hostile towards other species and each other. Docking practices would take place, mutinies would take place, and even some of the fallen from the houses would splinter off and turn into, well, pirates.
You will never win if you're constantly against each other.
Exactly. And they drifted for some time. Until...
That's why our Empress has the War Council. Everyone has an opinion, everyone has a say.
And I will give them this, according to the documents that I've been gifted by the House of Light. It appears that initially the houses were pretty cool with each other, exactly directly after the drift, but as time progressed and their shifts drifted farther and farther away from their solar system, into ours, there was more infighting, more anger and frustration, which I could understand. I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like to have this glorious empire, and then your machine god, abandons you, leaves you to these monsters of the dark, and then you're forced to flee your planet, and now you have nothing, and you're stuck on these massive ships, these ketches.
We may have not have worshipped the Traveler, or a machine god, or whatever you guys want to call it, but I can sympathize about losing your world.
It's frustrating.
It's more than just frustrating.
Maddening, you could say. So eventually all those houses I just previously discussed made their way to the Sol system. This was around the same time as our collapse. So a lot of the species in the Sol system started arriving. The first to technically be there, who technically had already been there before, were the Vex. They had already been there. They had been there for some time. The collapse happens, and the Hive and the Disciples, specifically Nezarec and beings like Savathun, showed up in the system. Then you have the Cabal, who were one of the last to arrive in the system. They were one of the more recent entries. Their scout legions arrived after the collapse, and roughly around the same time.
My apologies. Sorry for showing up so late to the show.
Well, by then, our civilization was gone. It is predicted and discussed that there could have been dread in our solar system at the time of the collapse, but this is not a story on the collapse. Trust me, that'll have its own episode. Anyways, the houses showed up in the system and practically made their territories known. I will quickly go over each of the groups and where they ended up settling. So, let's start with Judgment. So, House Judgment is unique even amongst the other houses because they were seen as historians, tradition keepers, scribes. So, their house was unfortunately, at the time of the Whirlwind, their house was separated so that members of the House of Judgment were given to each of the other houses. Now, the best example of this was Varix the Loyal, who had been gifted to, or who had been tasked to work under the House of Wolves at the time. So their house was dissolved, but not exactly. Anyways, let's go over the other houses. The Devils and the Kings made their claim on Earth, more specifically in the Cosmodrome. Their approaches to how they operated were significantly different, and we will go over those very shortly. The House of Winter ended up on Venus. The House of Wolves ended up in our asteroid belt, closer to Awoken territory, where they would have their own little skirmish. Well, skirmish, I would say war, actually, called the Reef Wars, where the Awoken and the House of Wolves would fight each other until the House of Wolves were defeated, and their leader at the time, named Skolas the Rabid, would be imprisoned. They would eventually be absolved into the Awoken monarchy as members, kinda. It's very interesting how their relationship is with the Awoken. The Exiles ended up on the moon, though we have now figured out that there was a contingent of Exiles that made their way to a planetoid known as Kepler. This is a relatively new development, but the Exile that I know, or the ones that I was more privy to, were the ones found on the moon. The House of Rain appears to have gone to Mercury, and the House of... where is the... Give me one quick second. The House of Scar was found in a different location. Actually, no. The House of Scar appears to be... Oh, yeah. I apologize. The information that I received is out of date a little bit. Here, give me 1 second. All right. It appears that the House of Scar was a house that was destroyed by the House of Winter during the Whirlwind. Though it is believed that one member of the House of Scar lived. Or two, it appears. The two predicted individuals that could have been amongst the House of Scar includes Tanix, the Scarred, and Captain Avarok, the Covetous.
I thought Tanix was a part of House Salvation.
So Tanix would eventually join the So for a while, Tanix himself was a mercenary who worked both under the House of Wolves as well as the House of Devils. Oop. And eventually he would end up joining the House of Salvation after the formation of the House of Salvation by a friend of his known as Aramis, the ship stealer, who was initially a member of the House of Devils. So, consider Tanix is more so less of a named house individual and more of just a mercenary who jumps houses. Which is certainly interesting, but he will have his own spotlight with time. Now that we have our players on the board, let's go over each of the houses and discuss their fates. So, let's start with the House of Rain. The House of Rain was considered the lowest of the low, and they ended up on Mercury. It was at this time that Mercury was a garden world and was slowly being turned over by the Vex. So they went to Mercury, and during the Dark Age, which is the age between the Collapse and the City Age, not during the time of the... Definitely a time during, or before, I should say, a time before the Young Wolf had ever risen. The house attracted a small group of colonists on Mercury, and among them was Saint 14, the Guardian, who practically destroyed the remnants of this house. Now, this house at a time was known as a warrior house, where it was filled with warriors who would fight, but by the time they arrived in our solar system, and by the time they planted themselves on Mercury, they had far fallen from the group of warriors that they had become. They were nothing more than a ragtag team of scavengers. Now, the House of Rain believed, or they had this belief that a Kell of Kells would rise. They were the ones who initially crowned, or initially considered Chelchis to be the Kell of Kells. But unfortunately, their time in our solar system was cut short by both us and Saint. Now, how we were there to help in their destruction, or not we, I should say the Guardians of the modern age, more specifically that Guardian, the young wolf.
I was about to say, what do you mean we?
Yeah.
I had no problem with
The modern forces, more specifically the young wolf, was able to access a corridor of time, which allowed him or her to step back into time to help Saint way before the City Age. It was quite interesting. The logs from both Osiris and the young wolf's camera in his or her helmet is fascinating, to say the least. I would definitely recommend to all of those listening to check out the event known as the Corridors of Time, because it is quite the time-traveling, alternate universe, interesting anomaly. Anyways, that is the fate of the House of Rain. They were warriors who ended up on Mercury and were promptly destroyed by Saint 14. The next house we are going to discuss is the House of Devils. The House of Devils was one of the houses that landed in the Cosmodrome. This house was quite expansive in comparison to other houses, more so due to the fact that they had more influence in Guardian history than probably any other house, with maybe the exception of the House of Salvation. So, this house was known as the House of Dancers at one time, which is interesting of a name, but okay.
Dancers?
Dancers, that is correct. They were known as the House of Dancers. Back on their time on Reese, they were known as a peaceful house in comparison to some of the others. During this time, a bunch of members were in the House of Devils, including Aramis. She was a member of the House of Devils back when she was on Reese. And other members, such as Rickus, Solkiss, and Axis. Axis being a member of the Splicers, which was a subsection of each house. Each house has a subsection known as Splicers, who are technology experts. They typically can hack into just about any type of technology thrown their way, including stuff like human technology and even Vex technology, which exceedingly fascinating that they were able to harness more easily and controllably harness Vex technology in comparison to humans, who every time we've tried to control Vex technology, it tends to blow up in our faces. Note both Clovis Bray and Lakshmi too. That is all I will say on that matter. Anyways, the House of Devils set themselves up in the Cosmodrome, with another house taking a similar approach, known as the House of Kings, and we will get to them soon. The house's main members, their trifecta, was Sulcus, who was the Kell of Devils, who unfortunately met his fate at the hands of Saint 14 during his Scourge of the Houses. Basically, Saint 14 at a time pretty much went down and started hunting down and weakening all the houses in the solar system. He killed Sulcus, the Kell of Devils, by headbutting him to death, which is...
Excuse me?
Oh yeah. Saint 14 is known for his headbutt attack, and according to this encounter, as described by Saint 14 himself, Sulcus had him picked up and had him in a death grip, and Saint 14 headbutted Sulcus, the Kell, to death. Like, I think it may have been one, but I cannot remember exactly. But he headbutted him and shattered his skull. Saint 14 is quite a monster.
Thinking about that gives me a headache.
Saint 14 is quite a monster among the Eliksni. They held him as a demon, as it were. But very interesting. So Sulcus was destroyed.
I'd ever fight the man, but I keep it in mind to stay far away from his head.
So Sulcus was defeated at this time. After him, Rixus was also defeated, this time by another very prominent guardian in our history, the Young Wolf himself. And at this time, the only member of the Triumvirate was Sepix Prime. Sepix Prime was also destroyed by the Young Wolf, very, very early on. After this time, the house was weakened. Practically just ragtag groups of Fallen trying to fill the inevitable void left by the triumvirate leadership of the House of Devils.
I have a question for you, Jorio.
Correct. Ask away.
Have you ever fought alongside the Young Wolf?
You know, that is a good question. I have had conversations with the Young Wolf. I have not fought alongside of him. I've reviewed both his camera, his or her camera footage on their helmet. I have talked with them in extensive amounts, as well as other guardians who made up their fire team. And if you want to say that I was in a battle with them, the battle against the Witness, I was present, so I guess so. But I don't deem that as necessarily me fighting alongside them, because I was too busy fighting off the forces of the Witness. Meanwhile, the Young Wolf and their compatriots were fighting the Witness themselves. So I have seen them in action, and they are quite the spectacle to see. But no, I have not fought alongside them.
I technically fought alongside them, but I will tell that story when it comes.
Interesting.
But I just thought it was interesting because you say the Young Wolf and he fights with other guardians. And I thought maybe you would fight alongside him, because I don't know. I don't know the relationship between guardians and other guardians. I know some are friendly, some are hostile.
Most guardians are friendly with each other. My history in the field is varied. I had to take a step away from field work for a number of years during the Taken War. But that'll be a discussion for another time. Before that, when I was doing my work, the Young Wolf was still making a name for themselves, I should say. So I was a younger man, more concerned with stopping threats that appeared in some of the wake of the Young Wolf's actions. Not to say that they were caused by the Young Wolf, but domino effect that I had to stop. But alas, I don't, I hold much respect for the Young Wolf. Quite the individual. Anyways, let's get back to the history of the Devils real quick, because we still have three major points to go over in the Devil's history. After their destruction at the hands of the Young Wolf and other Guardians, I will say other Guardians were also responsible for them never really recovering from their initial defeat of their triumvirate. The House of Wolves, during the Wolves expansion, where the Skolas returns as the prophesized Kell of Kells, which he named himself, by the way. Talk about ego. He tried to recruit all the other houses together, including the House of Devils, and the Guardians, including the Young Wolf, were able to stop said meeting from going forward. It is unknown whether or not they were actually going to join, but regardless, it's up for debate. After this event, one more event would shake this house, or two more events would shake this house to the core. The next major event was the Taken War, which would affect the entire Sol system, not just the Dreadnought. Many of the House of Devils and even the House of Kings were taken at this time, leaving the house in even dire numbers than they were before. What remained of the House of Devils after the Taken War would turn to the Splicers of their faction to become the Devil Splicers, which is a subsection of the Devils, more specifically the subsection that infused themselves with SIVA, a human technology, technovirus at this time.
Steve, I do not even want to be within a yard of that stuff.
Well, thankfully for you, all of SIVA at this point, with the exception of one exotic weapon that I'm sure a lot of Guardians have their hands on, most SIVA is defunct because the control station for SIVA, the replication chamber, is destroyed. Which
I've heard what it's done to those Eliksni, and I do not fear many things, but SIVA is something I will admit I fear.
Wow. Funny enough, they did not fear it. They viewed it as becoming machine gods, because in Eliksni culture, the Traveler is a god, and servitors are pretenders to that god. That's why servitors are made in a circular, spherical design. If they
So
believe
kind of
that...
like if we're going off human religion, it's kind of like a false messiah.
Correct, I would say. Or the ability to turn yourself into a god, which to outsiders could be deemed as a false prophet or a false messiah. It was around this time that the SIVA crisis occurred, after they had finally gotten their hands on the replication chamber and turned it back on, which the Young Wolf and his compatriots, his or her compatriots, were able to stop in its tracks. At this time, Axis, the Archon Prime, became the de facto leader, with the resurrection of other notable fallen members in the system, that being both Tannix, who was revived on the moon, which we will quickly go over his time with the Wolves when we get to the Wolves, and Sepix. Sepix Prime was resurrected as Sepix Perfected. Both of these threats would eventually be put down in response. There were also other notable members of the Splicers, including a couple of mad scientist types. I can't remember their names at this time, unfortunately, but I remember one of these mad scientist types were able to take out the eye of an ogre and turn it into a weapon. Quite the Frankenstein, or I think it's called a Frankenstein. Old Earth history. But
whatnot, like, I want to say I am happy that ogre got what it's deserved. But at the same time, my anger cannot make me say anything nicer than that.
The ogre was destroyed. Both the ogre and the mad scientist, who I cannot remember the name. I'm just going to keep calling them the mad scientist, unfortunately. Um, Please get me the name of that at some point. When we get to the more in line with the Siva splicers for their own episode, we'll discuss that. Anyways, after the destruction of the Siva the Siva splicers, the house was pretty much in this borderline defunct place, and eventually the remaining members of the House of Devils threw down their banners at the right before the Red War occurred. And that is the history of the Devils in our system. Next up, we will discuss the House of Winter, which is a little bit quicker. Their history is... by the way, I should note, before we continue on, the House of Devils, each house has their own insignia and color scheme. For the House of Devils, their color scheme is red. For the House of Winter, their color scheme is like a light blue, cyan color. This house was one of the struggling houses. This was not one of the upper echelon houses like the Kings or the Devils or the Wolves or the...
All these Eliksni houses have unique names, I must say. Jorio, if you had an Eliksni house, what would you name it?
That is a good question. The House of...
Mine would be the
Lore?
House of Warbeast.
The House of Beasts. There you go. Anyways. So, the members of the House of Winter include Draxus the Winter Kell and Simics Prime. There was no designated Archon priest at the time of their arrival in the system, and they primarily settled on Venus, showing interest in the Ishtar Academy, which is a college that was set up on Venus when it was made into a... when it was terraformed by the Traveler, I should say. There you go. It is unknown. So we don't know exactly what happened to Simics Prime, but it is believed to have been destroyed, specifically a while ago. Anyways, leaving the only leading member of the House of Winter being Draxus, the Winter Kell, who the Guardians, and more specifically the young wolf, was able to put him down aboard his ketch. Quite swiftly, in fact. It is deemed as a non-issue almost. Their house structure was relatively weak in comparison to other houses. I would even go as far as to put them on the same level as another house like the House of Rain. Just weakness. It was unfortunate that we didn't get to learn more about this house before its relative destruction. By the way, this house was practically... I mean, it went through the same issues that the House of Devils went through, whether that be the Taken War, the Wolves expansion. Didn't really associate themselves with the Siva splicers, so after the Taken War, they were pretty much defunct. A notable member outside of the Draxus would be Greylix, who was a Winter Baron, who eventually defected to the wolves, it appears. Or maybe not. No, I apologize. I'm confusing it with Grey Riss, who was on. Oh, okay. So, okay, I'm making a Grey Licks and Grey Is are in both Winter Barons. One's a Baron, one's a Baroness. The Winter Baron, the Grey Licks, was in charge of trying to ascertain information. From the archive underneath the Ishtar Academy, and Grey Riss was a Winter Baroness who was in talks to leave her house, which was Winter at the time. And then she was taken, unfortunately. The other notable member, but not really member, of the House of Winter was Axer, the Archon Priest. The members of the House of Winter had freedom from the prison of elders and were trying to resurrect him, but he's not technically a part of the House of Winter. He's actually a member of the House of Wolves. Confusing stuff. Exceedingly confusing about all the relationships between people and who belongs to who and who's with who and yada yada yada. Anyways, once again, after the Taken War and the destruction of the remaining member, since the Triumvirate was practically dead by the time we got there, it was literally just Draxus, and the Wolves expansion, they...
You may call him a lone wolf now.
Well...
I'm so funny.
Their house was destroyed, and they, the remaining members of the House of Winter threw down their banner in right before the Red War happened. And by the way, take note of that. That's going to happen a couple more times. The next house we will be going over is the House of Kings, which is another interesting house. They were technically the most noble of the houses that arrived in the system. They had the most power by the time they arrived in the system. Their history is exceedingly interesting, and their philosophy is exceedingly interesting even amongst other houses. Meanwhile, while the other houses of the Eliksni were very open and just bold with their actions, the House of Kings were very secretive, clever. They preferred to hide in the shadows rather than, do whatever. So they also landed in the Cosmodrome. They were encountered a couple times by Guardians and the Young Wolf, but we were never really able to find their Kell, which is named Krask. At the time, they didn't really have a prime servitor, nor did they have an Archon priest, an established Archon priest at the time, which could go to show like their structure was significantly different in comparison to other houses. Anyways. So this house encountered quite a lot of things, in fact. They were present at the Battle of the Twilight Gap, which by the way, I am notably skipping over that event. I'm going to briefly describe it here, but that will get its own episode because it is exceedingly important in the history of both the Guardians and the Fallen / Eliksni. Let's just say that there was a battle in which all the houses united, with the exception of the Wolves, who were not present, and they tried to take over the last city and invade it, but they were fought off, mainly because the Wolves were not present, because at the time they were fighting their own war. But we'll get to that in time. That'll be another episode. Going back, the Kings had to deal with, all the usual suspects. The Wolves expansion, who, by the way, it shall be noted that when the Young Wolf and his compatriots stopped a contingent of Wolves who were holding a meeting with the Kings, it could be It could be insinuated that the kings were very likely going to join the wolves if it wasn't for us going and stopping a meeting between the wolves and the kings. They were relatively close. At the time...
Dario, how many Eliksni houses exactly are there?
Oh, this is nearly a fraction. These are the ones that we know of, and that were not lost to either the whirlwind or the drift. There
I
were
feel like House of Exile was probably the most naive, especially with what the Guardian went through, I think like a year ago.
the House of the Exile, and we'll get to them. They're actually
Archon, I believe
next.
his name was. He was. Oh, God.
The House of
There's
Exiles
something.
is another interesting sect, and we'll get to them in a minute. But the King's story is probably the most unique. So, the House of Kings set themselves up not only in the solar system, but in other places as well, including some places in the Tangled Shore. Their fate is, you can probably guess where their fate is, considering their colors are yellow. That is their primary color. Anyways, they had to also deal with the events like the Wolves expansion and the Taken War. They had to deal with a lot of different issues, and yet they were able to survive even past the Red War. Unlike the other ones who... Some of the members during the Siva crisis... so after the Siva crisis was over, some of the members of the Kings left their station, whereas others stayed put and stayed within the ranks. Now, after the events of the Red War, this was one of the only... This house, and there were only two houses in the system. The House of Dusk, which we will get to, and then the Kings. It goes to show how well structured the Kings were in comparison to the other houses, that they were actually, unlike the other houses who were beaten back by the Guardians and practically had to disband, their house was one of the only ones that actually stayed together. So, they were able to capture Uldren Sov, the House of Kings. They were able to capture Uldren Sov after the Red War, when he was discovered. After the Taken War, Uldren Sov crashed his ship in Mars, pretty much went adrift for a while, and was claimed by the House of Kings. They took him back. One of the a member of the House of Kings, a lower member named Fikrul, was dying, and he was an Archon. He was a lesser Archon. And Uldren saved him through a wish magic, turning Fikrul into the first of the Scorn. So, the House of Kings, over time after this event, was slowly turned into the Scorn, to the original Scorn. That's why the original Scorn have yellow armor. Krask, the last Kell of Kings, at the time, was docked and demoted back to the status of Dreg. He would eventually die. And the majority of the House of Kings became the Scorn, as more of them died and were risen by Fikrul. This is arguably one of the last vestiges of the older houses outside of Exile who was able to escape their destruction due to them being a different house in comparison to the others. It's significantly interesting that it was discovered after the events of Forsaken and the birth of the Scorn in the ashes of the House of Kings, that the House of Kings were actually able to board the Dreadnought and try to learn hive magic. It goes to show that this house, this King's house, was probably the most simultaneously the least encountered by the Guardians, and yet one of the most influential in the Guardians' history. Even more so than, say, the Wolves, which a lot of things come from the Wolves. Anyways, next house we'll be discussing that is the fate of the Kings. They either the remnants of the Kings died off or joined other factions, but the majority of them ended up turning into the Scorn due to Fick Roll. Next up, we'll be going over the House of Exile. Now, the House of Exile is distinguishable. Oh, I did mention. Sorry, I was about to say the Kings wore yellow. The House of Exile, they are described by their green color. For a very long time, they were seen as the... How do I describe them? The house that you send the criminals and the degenerates to. They were... Yeah, they are pretty much the rejects. They're the reject house. All the other, if you were rejected by your house, you were sent to the exiles, who for a very long time inhabited.
What causes you to get rejected by your house?
I don't know. By the way, they're unlike the other houses. This house, for the majority of their existence, they didn't really have a command structure. They didn't have a Kel. They didn't have an Archon. They didn't have a Prime Servitor. They would later get an Archon in during their rediscovery on Kepler, but on their time on the moon, they didn't really have one. I mean, they were full of criminals, rejects, degenerates. Pretty much where you sent the undesirables to go live on the moon.
You can call the Cabal cruel because of our ways, but just rejecting your kind and not giving a full description why?
I mean, once again, most of the time it was because the members of the House of Exile were made up of criminals and exiles. So, like, that's why they called them the exiles. Like, for example, if you were caught stealing as a dreg who'd already been docked, you could just be sent to the House of Exile to go live on the moon. The problem was the exiles lived on the moon at the time, and to this day, the moon was heavily infested with hives. So the House of Exiles, the criminals, the degenerates, the lowlifes, the members that were not wanted by the houses, were sent to practically die in a never-ending war against the hive.
The moon was my last and final mission for what happened to me. So I guess I could sympathize that they have to continuously fight there, no matter what condition.
They pretty much... The House of Exiles did not solely inhabit the moon. They inhabited two other locations. They did end members of the House of Exiles were made into the Scorn Barons. Not Fickrul, but the other like barons, like the Pyrrha and the Mindbender, and they were all members of the House of Exiles. Most of after the events of the Red War, a lot of them went to the House of Dusk, which we will get to after the Wolves. But some of them did, in fact, flee to the deeper parts of our solar system, including Kepler. So, more recently, they were rediscovered on Kepler, who they lived amongst the Ionians in relative peace. until certain events happened. That'll be its own little story. Lavask is the Archon Prime who led the this contingent of exiles for a time. But obviously, the Guardians' intervention obviously put a stop to that in its tracks, and Lavask was killed. It's certainly interesting how this group of misfits and criminals and undesirables were able to outlast groups like the Kings and the Wolves and the Devils. How a group of criminals, misfits, and rejecteds did this is surprising, to say the least. Other than...
I wouldn't find it that surprising. I've heard Eliksni are very good with making technology and building things in under an unexpected time limit.
Correct, but I just find it interesting how these guys were even... This group of exiles was able to evade...
What shocks me is how they all managed to work together, considering they're all apparently criminals and will steal a lot of things.
Well, at the time, it appears that the contingent of exiles under the Archon Lavask are way more religiously fanatical than other sects, which Lavask could have brought together this group of criminals and rejecteds together through religion. So, I just find it funny that entire houses were formed and then disappeared from our soul system while the exiles were still around. They even
I wonder how long they would last without ether.
So Eliksni, when they go without ether, they just shrink and eventually they starve to death. But it takes a while. It takes a while to starve them out.
Really?
Yes. I was privy to a lot of this information when the Eliksni first settled in in the last city.
Now I see why some Cabal adopt abandoned Eliksni hatchlings.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting how they were. I was privy to a lot of information. I was one of the only guardians who were really willing to step in and talk with about the culture, and I gained a lot of information that I know now with my time spent with the House of Light.
I truly wonder how many times have you had a conversation with Aramis Kell?
Not many. I have spent quite a bit of time with with the House of Light's scribe, Ido.
She's a very sweet girl.
Oh, she is adorable. As Drifter would say, crab cakes. Anyways, we got to get back to the thing because we still have 4 houses to discuss. The next major house we will talk about is the House of Wolves, which have probably some of the most amount of interaction with us. So when they arrived in the system, they arrived in the Reef, which was a Woken territory, and they engaged in a war called the Reef Wars. Very brutal war. Very brutal. They were conquered, and their leader at the time, Skolas, the Mad, as he was called, was imprisoned. A lot of notable members that we know of come from this group. Axor, as I previously described, was one of the Archon priests of the House of Wolves. Another Archon priest that rose at roughly around the same time was Keldar. Varixas was the original Kell of Wolves during the Reef Wars before he was supplanted by Skolas the Mad, or Skolas the Rabid. And another notable...
He definitely seemed pretty insane.
Oh, trust me. He was way more than insane. And one other notable member of the House of Wolves, not necessarily higher up in the leadership of the house, but certainly a notable member was Enox, who was a leader, not necessarily like the de facto Kel, but a leader nonetheless, who was the mother of Mithrax. She was a member of the House of Wolves, which is nice and
She's
cute.
still around?
No, she's dead.
Aw. Ido doesn't get to see her grandmother.
I don't think she'd want to. Enox was certainly an interesting character. That's how I'll put that. Fun fact about the House of Wolves. Pre-Whirlwind, they were known as the House of Gentle Weavers. Yeah.
Well, not so gentle anymore now, are they?
Yeah. So the House of Wolves is obviously they're able to be distinguished from their brethren by their dark blue coloration and their fur pelts. They have a lot of fur pelts. This color scheme would eventually be borrowed by another faction we'll get to very soon. But we'll just stick with the House of Wolves being the blue guys. So during the Reef Wars, they were pretty much busy with doing the Reef Wars to interact with humanity all that much. By the time that the Guardians were first able to interact with them, more specifically the Young Wolf, they were already under the leadership of Marasov and the Awoken Monarchy. After the death of Crota in his throne world, Skolos the Mad, or the Rabid, was able to break out of the Prison of Elders. And first thing he did was started to reunite all the houses together under his banner. He proclaimed himself to be the Kel of Kells and tried to turn a lot of the remaining houses, or what remained of them, into the wolves. Obviously, this did not go to...
how... Yeah, I was about to say, I'm pretty sure that would not go as planned.
No, it didn't, because of a certain Guardian and their compatriots. Time and time again, the wolves were stopped from recruiting the majority of each of the faction. Obviously, a couple members, more specifically of the House of Winter, did eventually end up joining the wolves. But Devils didn't really join. The Kings didn't really join. The Exiles kind of joined. And it was around this time that they took in the mercenary known as Tannix. But we'll get to him in a minute. So, besides the Kells and the Archon Priests, they actually had two prime servitors. Orbix Prime and Calyx Prime.
Wait, I forgot. They named their servitors?
Each of the prime servitors has a name, and then all of the mini servitors, if they're important enough, are given like the same name with a number. So, for example, Orbix had like Orbix 3, Orbix 12, Orbix 7. You know, like little members. Now, this was back in the day. In the more modern times, they don't really have prime servitors anymore. And even if they do have prime servitors, they aren't really named. This was something lost to time. One of their traditions that I feel that over time just kind of dissipated, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Like, what happens when a prime servitor is destroyed in a house?
That is a good question. I like that question. So, once again, the prime servitor is in charge of all the ether, right? They're in charge of the major ether production and distribution.
And then one of the members is the one who distributes.
Decides who to distribute to. That's the Archon Priest. Now, when it comes to the servitor, if the main servitor is destroyed, It doesn't spell the death of a faction of a house, but it's certainly a major blow. It's pretty much taking down the major way for them to obtain ether. So all the little
Taking away
sub-servitors,
the one thing to keep them alive.
all the little servitors pretty much have to work overtime. It also could destabilize the triumvirate of leadership, because if there's no prime servitor, the Kel and the Archon can't really have a hold of power over their constituents. So, if one member of the triumvirate,
really well-liked Kel, I would assume maybe you would still have power.
So this triumvirate of power at the top of the hierarchy of a fallen house, if only one member dies, it could radically destabilize the house. If two members die, or if two members die, it pretty much dooms the house. If all three are dead, it's kind of over. So, anyways, back to the wolves. So the wolves had 2 prime servitors, which is significantly interesting. Calyx. So Orbix Prime would go on to survive the initial expansion of the House of Wolves and would be seen during the events of the Taken War, whereas Calyx Prime and Calyx Reborn were more so the de facto prime servitor that the Wolves used. It was destroyed in the Prison of Elders by none other than, the Young Wolf. So that one didn't survive. That one was destroyed at the time of the Wolves Rebellion and the Wolves expansion. Orbix did survive this time, but he would not survive for very much longer afterwards. Anyways, after the failed attempts of the House of Wolves to recruit all the other houses, they went into the Vault of Glass, tried to procure themselves some Vex tech. They kind of did.
No, do not. I mean,
they kind of did. They tried to.
That's such a bad idea.
They attempted to possess the oracles. Didn't go as planned, but they did get access to the Vex gateway system. And then on top of the Vex Citadel on Venus, they brought House of Wolf members from the past to the present to fight the Young Wolf and their compatriots. But it was all for naught, because Skolas was defeated, captured by the Awoken, sent back to the Prison of Elders, where, in time, the Young Wolf and his compatriots would kill him. Leaving the House of Wolves at that time without Archon priests and without a Kel, leaving one of their prime servitors was gone, leaving the only remaining member, Orbix Prime. Orbix was able to avoid capture, and it was around this time, as well as after Skolas' capture, that Taniks and one of the wolves' catch, I forgot to mention this, each house has their own catch, which is a giant fallen ship. So they planted their catch aboard the moon. The Young Wolf and the Guardians were able to storm the ship and destroy Taniks. But the thing with Taniks is that he's kind of more robot than Fallen at this point, so he's able to come back pretty regularly. Anyways, as time passed, the ship would be taken over. We'll go over the events of the Taken War now, because they do affect the House of Wolves probably more than any other faction. During the Taken War, the Wolves' catch was invaded by the Taken. The Young Wolf was able to restorm the ship, clear out the Taken mess, and recover a exotic weapon known as the Black Spindle, I do believe, which would have a later reincarnation as the Whisper of the Worm. Next up, after that, Varix the Loyal, who had sided himself with the Awoken Monarchy once the Wolves had aligned themselves with the Awoken Monarchy, he instructed us to go hunt down Orbix Prime, who was hiding out on Mars. And by we, I mean the Guardians and the Young Wolf. The Young Wolf was able to destroy Orbix Prime, thus spelling the doom of the House of Wolves. The remaining members of the Wolves joined the House of Dusk. Now, there were many silent, like, small factions and small little, like, groups within the House of Wolves, including groups like the Silent Fang, the Queen Breakers, Palace Siege Breakers. We might go over the Wolves and the Reef. When we go over the Reef Wars, we'll go over that, because that, once again, deserves its own episode. It is quite important. So we'll go over that when we get to it. But, yeah. Their fallen house was technically, and I say this in quotations, destroyed on Mars, and now a lot of them joined the House of Dusk, which brings us to our next house. The next house we're going to be discussing is the House of Dusk. So, let me explain what happened. So, right before the events of the Red War, the Fallen could sense something was coming. They had the sense, whether it be like technological alerts or whatever, they knew something was coming. So all the splintered and destroyed factions, like the Kings, the Wolves, Winter, Devils, they all threw down their banners. And they joined up. They joined up on together as the House of Dusk. Their colors were purple and a little bit of white. This faction didn't really have major. Well, that's incorrect. I should put it like this. Despite being one unified faction, they were still very disorganized. They had an Archon priest, Raxel, but he was destroyed. He was killed very early on. They had a prime servitor named Brandax Prime, also destroyed. So it's think of it as the remnants of the Fallen as a species, and the Eliksni as a species that kind of coalesced together into one group, not out of a will to be together, but out of desperation and survival. This house would be...
You don't have to do anything you need to do to survive, so I can't
exactly
blame them.
So when they decided to come together, their house was able to expand. They initially were found on Earth, more specifically in the European Dead Zone, but they were found all over the place, including places like Titan and Nessus and the Tangled Shore. And even on the moon. So they were able to survive, and they still are going to this day. They're one of the only remaining factions that's still around today. Any member of the House of Dusk or any member of the Eliksni who doesn't follow the other two remaining houses tends to end up in the House of Dusks, who tend to have mercenary, pirate-like, survival comes first kind of a mentality. Once again, there isn't really a leader of the House of Dusk. Their leader structure is very not there. Now, there is one notable member of the House of Dusk who was formerly a member of the House of Wolves, who would go on to shape the history of the Fallen, or I should say Eliksni, forever. And his name was Mithrax the Forsaken. During an encounter on the
Is
Titan,
this the same Mithrax?
Yes, it is.
Hmm.
This fallen member. He was a not very high up, but he was certainly a member of this house. He led a strike team on Titan to go grab ether reserves, or ether supplies needed to create more ether. And during a battle, we saved him. The Guardians saved him. More specifically, the young wolf, but we as Guardians saved him. And after that, he let us have it. He didn't take it, he just let us have it. And after that point, his relationship changed. He didn't view the Guardians as these monsters who were consistently hunting and fighting and killing the Eliksni. He viewed them differently, as friends. And with time, Misrax, trying to say Misrax since it's his actual name. Mithrax is just the translation of his name. He would go on to have a fire team, actually, which I find exceedingly interesting. He actually had a hunter and a warlock amongst his ranks, especially during the events of Forsaken. It was around this time that he started forming a new house. This was the beginning of his formation, and it wouldn't really solidify itself until after the events of the Europa campaign. He would go on to found the House of Light. The House of Light is the Eliksni house that is friendly to humanity and Guardians. Their colors, they are identified by their colors of green. Though Mithrax himself wears stuff from a bunch of different factions. He's got blue of wolves. He's got a cloak of from the House of Devils. He's got some yellow armor from the Kings. So he's like a amalgamation, but most of the members of his group wear green. And this house is different from the other houses, for the major reason being that they're not hostile towards humanity, but they're way more religiously in tune, specifically with the traditions of old. They still worship their machine god and don't view it as blasphemous, or, they understand. A lot of the members of this faction understand that they were deemed not worthy and humanity was. And that just because humanity is deemed worthy to become guardians and become blessed with the light, doesn't mean that they still can't worship the traveler and its grace and its power. So they continued to do so. During their introduction, they were allowed into the city during the Vex crisis that was happening at the time, the Endless Night, if you remember that. I don't know if you remember that. I do. It was quite a dark time. There was a lot of human sentiment against this house who had lived
I was kind of around during that, but I might have not been really focusing on that.
Fair enough. I remember from the front lines, or I remember going into their camp, and I would hear all the disgusting prejudice against them from humans. And I can understand the prejudice. I mean, a lot of the humans interacted with very not so nice fallen along their journeys to the city.
Innocent. I've said a lot of things about humanity and any species we have encountered.
But a lot of it can easily be surmised that a lot of the hate and prejudice that they received from was directed by Lakshmi II, member of the leader of the Future War Cult, who pretty much led a giant hate campaign on them, not purely out of hatred, but simultaneously out of hatred and a desire to gain political power. She got, after the splicers of the House of Light were able to help us in stopping the Endless Night, Lakshmi attempted to kick them out of the system by using Vex Gates. Did not go the way she planned, and Lakshmi 2 was killed. Rest in peace. What was that Guardian lingo? Bozo. Um,
I was thinking of
since
something worse than that, but
so
yes.
since then, the House of Light have been our allies. They've been living in the city. They are fully integrated instead of being sectioned off to their little section. And they're deemed as friends. They have been friends. Ido has been quite a interesting figure who I've personally interacted with. We've had many conversations on Eliksni culture and even human culture. So it's certainly nice to have friendly fallen. Or I need to quit using that term because it's derogatory. Eliksni. They are Eliksni. Now, during the Europa campaign, another house had risen. A much darker house. The House of Salvation, otherwise known as the House of Darkness, the opposition to the House of Light, was had its formation truly begin during the events of the death of Cade 6. That being said, the primary members being Phylax, Aramis, Critus, Praxis, they kind of all met in the Prison of Elders, and when they were freed during the prison escape, by the way, was orchestrated by Varix. That was not like a mistake. Varix initiated it, and both Aramis and the founding members of the House of Salvation took advantage of this, as well as Uldren Sov and the Scorn. So Varix is partially responsible for the death of Cade 6. Not completely. I wouldn't.
Isn't Varix also responsible for Aramis Kell's imprisonment in the Prison of Elders?
Yes, but that's superseded by the fact that he let her go. And partially caused.
It just doesn't sit right with me about that.
So Varix at the time was worried about the Fallen. He was worried about his species, and he wanted to make sure that there was strong leadership. Now he tried to establish himself as a Kell, more specifically the Kell of Judgment.
I think he's a little too puny for that.
Yeah, he was kind of superseded by the House of Salvation and its members, who, while most of the members were not friendly towards him for being a traitor, Aramis understood that he was just trying to look out for the Eliksni, and offered him a place in the fold. And for a brief time, Varix became a member of became the judgment, the judgment scribe of the House of Salvation, if not a full member of the House of Salvation. The House of Salvation then made Reese Reborn, which is a miniature city on the planet of Europa, and they learned how to harness stasis. The young wolf and his or her compatriots would end up going to Europa and shutting that shit down, I should say. They attacked Phylax, then Praxis, and then went after Aramis herself, and were able to use stasis against the stasis user, and froze her in stasis. After this, they were able to finish off Critus, and also stop the two other members, Atrax and Tannix, who had also allied themselves with the House of Salvation. Atrax was supposedly killed during the raid on the Deepstone Crypt, but this is not confirmed. There have been reports of Atrax being seen in other places, like the Vesper Station, though it is argued that the Atrax that appears on Vesper Station is not actually Atrax, but a Vexmine who's possessing a clone copy body of Atrax. It's confusing. But Atrax may still be alive.
Atrax for some odd reason. I don't know.
Atrax is certainly interesting. Atrax is the only known Eliksni exo.
I would like to talk to her
Uh,
about what it feels like to be an exo of a different species other than humanity.
yeah, I mean
What if it's different for everyone?
it is. The fun fact for the hunters out there: the Mask of Bacchus, the skin part of the Mask of Bacchus, that is Atrax's face. That
Excuse me?
that's her face. That's Atrax's face. She ripped her own face off.
Why?
Something to do with degenerative exo mind. It's exo related, and we'll get to that in the exo related episode. Basically, it's a mind thing. Something about like not their exo minds not rejecting their bodies and not really understanding. It has something to do with that. It's a little bit more complicated. I'll go over that during the exo episode, since it's important to note the difference between humanity's reaction to that process and the only Eliksni to also undergo the process and have a different reaction. Anyways,
Deep in a log, I found that we Cabal have tried to do the exo experiment, but we were shut down by the Guardians.
the Guardians really, so I can understand the Guardians' hesitancy to allow or to continue such a process. Whether it's because we don't want the Cabal to become potentially empowered, or because of the process that individuals must go through to become an exo at the hands of the absolutely despicable Clovis Bray. You can leave that up to debate. My take is that I wouldn't want any.
That man makes Callus that man.
He will have his own dedicated
almost
episode.
Makes Callus run for his money.
He has his own dedicated episode. We will go over his history, and boy, will we not be kind to him. I'm sure the exo mind in the Braytech Labs on Europa will be fuming after he listens to our log on him. I'm sure he will be fuming and not allow me anywhere near that facility ever again. But we'll get to that at a later time.
Who's gonna stop you? You're a guardian.
So, we don't want to get into that. Anyways, so after Aramis was frozen, she remained dormant, but alive for a very long time. The House of Salvation kind of went on the back burner for quite some time. Then, Aramis was revived by the witness, and took the remaining members of the House of Salvation and paired them with the fallen pirate mercenaries. Obviously, this did not go as planned. She failed to do what the witness had instructed her to do, was secure the relics of the disciple Nezarek. Then some of the remainder of after this failure, the remainder of her house some of the remainder of her house was put under the thrall of the hive god Zevor Wrath, and some of the members were turned into Taken or Wrathmorn or even Scorn, including our dear Praxis the Technocrat, who became a Scorn.
I don't know what's worse, being taken or being Scorn.
Being taken, 1000%. Scorn is not pleasant. You're pretty much a reanimated corpse. But being taken, is.
I can only imagine how bad that hurts.
But being taken is far worse. It is like having your soul ripped out of your body.
I don't know what that feels like.
I do, and it is not pleasant. Anyways, Aramis was then tasked with blowing up the Traveler via Rasputin's technology. She failed at this. The witness deemed her a failure and pretty much rejected her after this point.
We aren't
She
trying to
went
say
on.
that what she's doing is justified, but going through that
No.
much unresolved grief has to say something
The
about her
House of
character.
Salvation then, after that point, kind of took a backseat. They didn't really. They didn't really do much of anything. They were heavily fragmented at this point. They took a backseat for the majority of the aftermath between the Veils, the opening of the Traveler, and the discovery of Neomuna, up until about the Paleheart incident, the battle for the Paleheart. They were very. They definitely took a backseat. Then they reappeared during the events of the stopping of the final shape as one of the thrall species of the Witness. Now, not all the House of Salvation followed the Witness, but a decent chunk of them did. Those who did not, who still followed Aramis, left the system for a time to go try to find Aramis's wife. And we'll get to Aramis's story at a later time, because we're pretty much going over the basics of her story. This is more so about the house, not the leader. After the Witness's defeat, there would be one more time that the House of Salvation was truly interacted with, and that was during the reemergence of Fikrul and his Revenant Scorn. The remaining members of the House of Salvation pretty much gave themselves up, including Aramis, imprisoned for a bit after the destruction and defeat of Fikrul. The Echo of Song, which was the echo that Fikrul possessed, was then attempted to be controlled by Mithrax, who was infected by the Curse of Nezarec at this time, but was ultimately given to Aramis. Aramis then decided to leave the system. She was still not on great terms with humanity, still hated them practically, but she understood that at the end of the day, she just wanted to go home. She wanted to go home. She wanted to go find her family. And with that, the remaining House of Salvation members and Aramis left the system with the Echo of Song. Their current whereabouts are unknown. They are likely heading their way to Reese. In the meantime, right after this decision and after being gifted the Echo of Song, Aramis Kell finally relinquished her title of Kell, I guess. Well, kinda. She acknowledged that Mithrax was fit to be Kell of Kells. She pined for it for a time, but now she realized that Mithrax was the better fit. And as she left, she submitted to Mithrax, and Mithrax is now known as the Kell of Kells, the ultimate.
So what does the Echo do exactly for her?
So we don't know its power under Aramis. We do know what Fikrul was able to accomplish with the song. He was able to turn regular Eliksni into Scorn.
I see.
We don't know what its power holds. The echoes are still exceedingly not well studied, because every time that we got a hold of an echo or found an echo, it was either in the possession of somebody or was actively trying to fight us. Looking at you, Echo of Navigation. Looking at you. So, that's kind of it for the houses. I mean, all the houses that we discussed prior are relatively defunct. The only ones that remain are the House of Dusk, the House of Light, and what remains of the House of Salvation, which is now gone from our system. I'll quickly note that not all the Fallen fall under these factions. Some of them decided to go back to their pirate days during the Drift. And others joined crime syndicates like Spider and Kel's Scourge. So, I guess a final note that I could say about the Fallen Houses is that it's exceedingly interesting to hear about the culture of another species and the history of how they went from these group of just houses that were noble and peaceful and nice, and how the whirlwind and the drift and their time in the soul system shifted them so drastically that almost all of the well, not even almost all of the original houses are gone, and the only houses remaining are the remnants of the old houses and houses that were created during our time in the soul system. And it's also to be noted that they took on a lot of the Eliksni took on a lot of human culture the more time that they spent here. They had their own culture, then they kind of devolved into pirates, which is what we call them for some time, and they even turned to crime syndicates, like the mafia, like little mafias and crime lords and stuff like that. The only other thing I should note is that besides the pirates and the crime syndicates, there is another fallen faction known as the Pikers. They are found, they are atheists, which is even interesting amongst the Fallen. Most Fallen are religious to the machine god, whereas the Pikers are atheists, which is almost never heard of in the Fallen. So, anyways, that do you have any notes that you would like to, any notes or questions or things that you would like to say before we do our outro?
Well, it's weird. What exactly are the Eliksni's goal at the end of the day?
Survival. Well, it depends. Most of them are focused on survival. A lot of them still hold the machine god in a god. Well, they call it the machine god, and they hold it in this light that they need to. They view humanity. A lot of them viewed humanity as thieves, and that they needed to steal the machine god back for themselves.
I mean, our goal is to go back to Torabottle. I even have, like, not many Cabal want that same goal. That's why they separate themselves from the Empire and aren't chased down or murdered for it. The Empress supports that decision. Some even became pirates. I know a Cabal that I was friends with for a very long time. Her name was Tulka. She became a pirate, and now she's a pirate of a very Eliksni-dominated crew. Me and her talk from time to time. We send messages to one another, because again, we did grow up together. But even then, her goal is kind of the same thing. Survival, glory. Nothing else to it.
So, a lot of them wanted the Traveler back. But now, as time has passed, the three remaining... I guess the three remaining houses each have a different goal. For the House of Light, they just wish to worship the Traveler. I don't think they care where they are. I think they just want to stay and just worship the Traveler. As for the House of Dusk, they are more focused on survival and the old school take the Traveler away from the humans because they're thieves. The House of Salvation is interesting. They, for a very long time, they deemed the machine god, the Traveler, as the enemy for abandoning them. And that they should not rely on such a being, but instead turn to the pyramids and darkness and the Witness for power instead. Since the Witness's defeat, they've kind of lost purpose. They don't like the Traveler, but they're not trying to actively destroy it anymore. At this point, I think most of the remainder of the House of Salvation, including the leader Aramis, they just want to go back to roots. They just want to go back, reclaim their world, and stay there. Which is honorable.
It's a lot of destruction you have to clean up. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have a whole entire world to clean up after Zevo Wrath.
So, thankfully, she still has stasis under her thrall, and now she also has an echo. I mean, we've seen what the power of an echo in the hands of beings like the
Thick roll.
conductor and Fickrul. So it's I think while it
She
could
could
be,
possibly rebuild her entire thing
I
just
think
with stasis.
Reese has the potential to be reclaimed. I don't think it's going to be an easy process, especially if there's remaining forces of darkness still there. But I feel like it can be
That's what I was about
reclaimed.
to ask. Like, after the Eliksni fled Reese, there has to be something that took it over. It couldn't just sit there dormant like an open treasure chest.
Perhaps.
That is territory waiting for the taken.
Who knows? I guess we'll have to find out in the future, and maybe if we get communications from Reese after it's recolonized, or maybe we'll figure out what happened.
Maybe.
Anyways, that is all the time we have for today. We appreciate everybody who tunes into these logs. It
We
is
thank you for listening and watching, depending what you're listening from.
correct. Speaking of that, if you are currently listening to this on Spotify, you can also watch us on YouTube. If you are currently watching this on YouTube, you can also listen to us on Spotify. The Destiny Lore Emissary Logs. Do you want to? Do you want to do
Say my
your?
common outro.
Well, no. Do you want to link yourself there, co-host?
Yes, you will find me on TikTok under addy.h.art, and you will also find me on Twitch, which will also be linked on my TikTok. And I do have a Discord, but again, you can also find that on my TikTok page. Everything, every social media I have, it will be linked to my TikTok.
Excellent. As for me, you can find me on TikTok under both Jurio11 Lorekeeper as well as Jurio Gaming 00. I am also on Discord, Twitter /X, and Kick under the name Jurio Gaming 00 if you want to catch live streams. If you have any business related inquiries, we have our business email down in the description of the YouTube video. So if you want to go find that. And I guess before we go, we could talk about the next 3 episodes. We'll talk about the next 3. The next episode we will be covering is Kaido's Ascendancy, which I'm sure my co-host is exceedingly excited about.
I don't think you understand how excited I am,
Exceedingly
Jorio.
excited. Then the episode after will be Big Red, which goes over Rasputin and his history. And then
Which I
after,
don't know actually anything about, so I will be learning just as much with you guys.
yes. And then the episode after that, I do believe, is the Weapon Foundries episode, where we will be going over less of lore and more of science and culture between the weapon foundries, because there's a lot of people don't really understand how they operate and their the weapons that they're using, but they're quite fascinating, and I'll have to see if I can't pick up a sponsor from that. Hopefully it's not from Tex Mechanica after what's going on with fucking Bale, but
Let's
we'll
hopefully
see.
not.
We'll
But in the
see.
meantime, I hope I can teach you all everything there is to know about my Empress.
Yes, indeed. We will get to that episode next. So, anyways, once again, thank you guys for watching. And want to do your outro?
Of course, we are Cabal. We eat the mountains, and we drink the seas, and we will conquer the stars. And I'll see you all on the battlefield.
See you,
Good day, Guardians.
I messed up right there. See you, Starside Guardians. Cue the outro.
Cue the outro.